prove that you are not the father of the defendant's 18-month-old son because the plaintiff already acknowledged he was the father by signing the birth certificate?
Well, Your Honor, first of all, I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm 22 years old, and I'm looking to expand my brand. Putting a child on me is like stopping me from leaving and going to do what I want to do. So I'm like really stuck, and I need the answers because it's not my child.
When you were at the hospital, did you believe the child was yours at the time?
No.
You did not?
No.
His mom was there telling him the baby looked just like you. Ain't no denying this baby.
Was your mother present at the birth, Mr. Muriel?
No.
Zedrian Muriel. You chose that name, not me.
You chose it.
And do you understand what being the legal father means?
Yes.
You do. So you now know that once you sign it under the law, you are that child's father. Even if you're not his biological father, you.
In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom today, the tension is not about noise or anger, but about the unavoidable collision between law, biology, accountability, and identity. This is a day stacked with petitions, test results, life-altering testimony, and the emotional weight of every parent who has ever wondered what stands on the other side of truth. The space is not simply legal, it is emotional jurisprudence, a human example of how truth changes everything once it leaves the mouth of the judge and becomes binding in the law. Those who arrive hopping for denial will receive clarity, and those longing for support will either be granted validation or handed responsibility they once ran from. Before Judge Lauren Lake, families gather carrying complicated pasts, damaged relationships, corrected assumptions, and legal terminology that suddenly holds the power to change the future of a child. The concept of justice in jurisprudence is mentioned not as philosophy, but as immediate reality. Who is the father who becomes legally responsible, who is owed child support, who carries custody rights, and who must now rebuild life based on DNA that cannot be edited or argued away? Each person present has crossed this courtroom threshold for a singular reason. DNA is no longer an idea to avoid, but the foundation of identity. Words such as adverse inference in Evidence Act, Truth Changes Everything podcast, the Divorce Course podcast, and Celebrate Recovery testimonies echo not as titles, but as emotional reflections on accountability and consequence. The parents and extended relatives have come here because they can no longer carry on using speculation, denial, social media claims, deception, or verbal promises that shift depending on mood. Today the evidence, the test, and the law speak louder than the heartbreak that preceded it. Judge Lauren Lake addresses each petitioner with calmness but unmistakable firmness. For her, this is not entertainment. This is a judicial stage in a divorce case, a parentage fight, an inheritance claim, or a child support entitlement battle. The DNA test stands as the legal instrument that ends arguments, silences interruptions, and determines whose last name, whose house, whose insurance, whose financial responsibility, and whose everyday presence belongs to a child. This courtroom transforms biology into obligation. Words like DNA test people regret taking into the emotional landscape, not because truth is cruel, but because truth is often late, uncomfortable, and irreversible. Here, the language is legal, but the message is deeply personal. Every mother, every alleged father, every sibling, and sometimes a new partner or grandparent stands before Judge Lauren Lake to defend, deny, admit, or plead. There is always someone claiming a signature was pressured, a birth certificate signed in confusion, a night remembered differently, a relationship broken by jealousy. But once the case reaches this bench, confusion is stripped away and transformed into admissible fact. The judge is not here to fix their love story. She is here to determine parenthood with the authority of sworn science. This environment is not casual conflict. It is what the game-changing attorney podcast would describe as the moment in which legal truth overrides emotional preference. It is what adoption stories' full episodes often circle back to. The moment identity becomes confirmed, not assumed. Judge Lauren Lake locates the core dispute not in who yelled first, who cheated, who moved, or who posted online, but in the legal question that binds them all. Who is the biological parent and who must therefore fulfill the weight of that role with consistency instead of disappearance? The testimony spoken in this courtroom today covers childhood dates, holiday events, travel timelines, and conception windows. Not because gossip matters, but because the evidence stage in divorce case must be supported by calendar truth, not emotional memory. The judge listens to each sworn word as she has countless times before, reminding young parents and extended family alike that ignorance of law does not excuse responsibility. The relationship between law and justice shifts from lecture to lived experience as she clarifies that signing a birth certificate makes someone legally a father even before science confirms it. Only in this courtroom can DNA undo or confirm that signature, and with it, child support and custody obligations under Supreme Court child support precedent. There are no loud theatrics in this description, no yelling, no dramatic exits, just the weight of testimony and the silent fear that sits in the heart of every accused or abandoned parent. Some regret cheating, some regret signing papers, some regret not staying, and some regret ever trusting who they slept beside. But Judge Lauren Lake does not base judgment on regret. She bases it on results. As she prepares to open the envelope that will finalize this chapter, those present feel the same emotional tightness that cheating stories across media often express. There is no undo button once results are spoken. A man denying fatherhood will either walk out cleared or forever tied by law. A woman insisting on truth will either be vindicated or confronted with another story to explain. A grandmother or aunt demanding involvement will either be backed by genetics or asked to step aside. The modern landscape of parenthood has moved beyond assumption. No more claims shouted online, no more whispered accusations at holiday gatherings, no more screenshot messages used as proof. In this courtroom, Lauren Lake explains clearly that DNA is the only witness who cannot lie, edit, panic, or defend. Each participant stands knowing that today is not simply a paternity verdict. It is the legal sorting of future birthdays, school decisions, medical forms, emergency contacts, holidays, custody weekends, insurance coverage, and every decision that shapes childhood. When truth is spoken here, entire family structures change. Couples reconsider how they speak to one another. Responsibility is no longer emotional, it is statutory. And in that transformation, the Celebrate Recovery testimony's sentiment becomes applicable. Truth is painful before it becomes liberating. Someone will leave proud, someone will leave ashamed, someone will leave responsible, but no one will leave confused. The courtroom under Judge Lauren Lake remains a place where silence does not indicate peace, but anticipation. Every present adult is aware that this day, like few in life, will alter their identity in relation to a child. The power of the DNA test becomes more than a procedure. It becomes the official moment when memory, denial, accusation, timelines, and emotional pleas collapse under science. Truth changes everything is not just thematic wording. It is the literal emotional climate surrounding this legal resolution. Judge Lauren Lake maintains her signature clarity not because she enjoys authority, but because she knows the world outside these walls will judge every person based on how they handle truth once she delivers it. This is the room where lies about fidelity, assumptions regarding conception windows, and whispered rumors of infidelity are turned into structured evidence, the kind referenced in the Divorce Course podcast, when discussing familial collapse and reformation. What is spoken here leaves no space for insecurity and ego. Law takes priority. Throughout her decades of legal translation of human harm and reconciliation, Judge Lauren Lake repeats the same foundational principles. A child must not carry the burden of adult chaos. In these paternity cases, she clarifies that the fight is not for victory, but for a child's legal and emotional continuity. She reminds parents that the relationship between law and justice requires that biology and responsibility align, especially if Supreme Court child support statutes must be applied. When she orders DNA results, she is not punishing or rewarding. She is setting the legal framework under which a child will be raised. When adults return to this courtroom for final judgment, they do not return confident. They return quiet, humbled by waiting days or weeks while a lab processed a swab. DNA test people regret taking is a phrase that resonates not because regret comes from the truth itself, but from the lifestyle that preceded and resisted truth. In most cases, both parents carry emotional embarrassment, one for sleeping with more than one partner during the conception period, another for denying involvement while simultaneously claiming emotional attachment. Judge Lauren Lake does not shame either side. She only eliminates confusion. This is a rare environment in which facts replace narrative. For many couples, this is the first time they speak without shouting and the first time they listen without interrupting. They are waiting for data. They are waiting for the moment science replaces memory. Like cheating stories shared across forums and commentary segments, this courtroom contains a universal arc: human frailty, suspicion, denial, confrontation, and then the decision to seek answers rather than continue emotional guesswork. The evidence stage in divorce case framework applies here as well, even for unmarried couples. Testimony must be consistent with dates, states, travel records, text archives, conception charts, and witness statements. Judge Lauren Lake clarifies that whether a father signed a birth certificate under pressure, fear, or confusion, that signature holds legal weight until DNA either confirms it or displaces it. The court does not encourage regret. It educates, it corrects, it finalizes. Paternity resolution is never just a biological determination. The legal implications extend toward adverse inference in Evidence Act, custodial claims, amendment of official documentation, insurance coverage, and future financial obligations. If the alleged father is confirmed, he does not suddenly become a voluntary figure. He becomes a statutory guardian, entitled to rights and bound to duties under law. If he is excluded, the woman's testimony must restructure, and the true father must be sought with renewed seriousness and legal expectation. In many hearings, Judge Lauren Lake steps beyond the legal pronouncement and into measured emotional mentorship. She often explains to young parents that adulthood is not defined by age, romance, or intention, but by the willingness to accept responsibility at the moment science proves it unavoidable. In this sense, this courtroom resembles the reflection found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies in which individuals confront truth without collapsing under its weight. The difference here is scale. A child's life and lineage hinge on the honesty spoken before the bench. The atmosphere also mirrors conversations from the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal expertise intersects with human consequence. Here, witnesses, family allies, jealous lovers, or protective siblings all discover that their assumptions, accusations, and passionate defenses carry less authority than the DNA tucked within an envelope. When Judge Lauren Lake lifts that envelope, no person present dares interrupt. Even the most vocal relative, convinced of resemblance, is silenced by the science that disregards comparison photographs and family opinion. Each mother present recalls every night of child-rearing alone, every financial worry, every pediatric appointment, every school form requiring a father's name and signature. Each alleged father recalls moments he tried to distance himself, moments he wanted clarity but feared legal chains, moments he almost stepped forward, and moments he intentionally stepped back. This is the internal reckoning they bring before Judge Lauren Lake, not an apology, but an admission of uncertainty. When the judge reads, her tone is not dramatic. It is conclusive. The words carry weight because they determine if child support will follow state guidelines, if custody must be split, if visitation schedules must be drafted, and if a child receives a redefined family structure. These cases reflect the layered emotions referenced in Adoption Story's full episodes: identity, belonging, roots, obligations, and the thread connecting humans through lineage. Parents learn that truth does not seek personal comfort, nor does it protect reputations. It protects children. That is the sole philosophy Judge Lauren Lake upholds, the same concept of justice in jurisprudence that binds every paternity case. The child's right to know origin, identity, support, and legal belonging. Here, in this second stretch of narrative, we observe that truth has already begun to settle before results are spoken. The waiting has reshaped their posture, softened attacks, and clarified priorities. The patterns that brought them here, pride, fear, secrecy, retaliation, fragmented intimacy, now begin dissolving under the administrative finality that DNA imposes. Once more, it is appropriate to emphasize that this courtroom is not a punishment chamber. It is a legal compass. It points individuals toward responsibility rather than emotional improvisation. It sets the boundary between past recklessness and future structure. It draws a line between speculation and proof. And as Judge Lauren Lake prepares for the pronouncement of biological certainty, no one present believes this is merely a test. It is a life rearrangement, a narrative correction, a legal reset. The courtroom reaches its final phase under Judge Lauren Lake, not because emotion has been exhausted, but because law has completed its gathering. All testimony, date references, conflicting statements, emotional appeals, suspicions, and behavioral patterns have been laid out with the seriousness of any evidence stage in divorce case framework. What began with doubt has arrived at the edge of truth, and truth is not delayed any longer. Judge Lauren Lake lifts the results not as a dramatic gesture, but as routine judicial responsibility. In her years of presiding over parentage matters, she has witnessed every variation of human conflict, from cheating stories born from retaliation, to regret over early intimacy, to misguided loyalty, to pressured signatures on birth certificates, to late-night text evaluations and misguided assumptions of resemblance. What sets this day apart is not novelty, but the universal reality that truth changes everything regardless of how often these situations repeat. The parents and extended family stand in a stillness that can only exist when science, law, and identity intersect. Judge Lauren Lake often reminds participants that the relationship between law and justice is not philosophical here. It is immediate, applying itself to child support, custody rights, visitation schedules, legal guardianship, surname registration, and state-based obligations that can stretch 18 years and beyond. The courtroom in these final moments becomes precisely what Supreme Court child support decisions have shaped across jurisdictions. A place where no parent can claim exemption from responsibility once DNA speaks. There is also a psychological release embedded in this moment. Even those who once claimed they did not want the result now realize they needed it. This is the phenomenon often discussed in Truth Changes Everything podcast conversations. Human beings may resist truth to protect reputation, but truth exists to protect future outcomes, especially when children stand in the center of conflict. The person who feared fatherhood, the mother who feared abandonment, and the relatives who feared exclusion now understand that DNA resolution is the only path to emotional stability. No party here leaves undefeated, all leave redefined. For some, the DNA results become validation of maternal consistency, a moment that removes whispered judgment from relatives, online posts, or side conversations. For others, this becomes a written declaration of fatherhood not based on assumption or resemblance, but on biometric evidence. The adverse inference in evidence act concept echoes here. Absence of cooperation before results can imply responsibility afterward. Judge Lauren Lake clarifies this repeatedly. The DNA test people regret taking are those who thought denial might be easier than obligation. Yet obligation is not punishment in her court. It is the reorientation of adulthood. Parenthood, she insists, is not an emotional title but a legal condition. She grounds her authority not in sentiment, but in statutory language and genetic truth. This is why individuals from every walk eventually find their way to her bench, some trembling, some defensive, some full of practice certainty. But when the envelope is opened, practice certainty becomes irrelevant. The outcome does not comfort every participant, it corrects them. In this, the experience reflects the emotional trajectory highlighted in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Healing begins not when truth is kind, but when it is undeniable. Parents often enter her courtroom with narratives shaped by pain, abandonment trauma, betrayal, loneliness, single motherhood exhaustion, financial instability, emotional instability disguised as strength. But in this final assessment, Judge Lauren Lake sees the child beyond the conflict. To her, the judicial system is not a weapon but a stabilizer. The concept of justice in jurisprudence she expresses here is always anchored to a child's right to identity, not an adult's desire for escape. The outcome, whether joyous or devastating, is clean. DNA assigns legal fatherhood or removes it. Child support begins or ceases. Custody actions will follow, and parents will now be treated not as adversaries but as co-guardians regulated by state policy rather than emotion. Across paternity history and adoption stories, full episodes, this moment is the pivot point that determines whether a child grows under clarity or confusion. Judge Lauren Lake interprets law with full awareness that every future milestone, first day of school, teenage rebellion, adulthood questions, medical forms, college applications, requires correct biological identity and lawful parental presence. What many fail to realize before entering this courtroom is that science brings not only confirmation but correction. People speak more carefully after DNA results. Threats soften. Grandparents reconsider boundaries. Step-parents reconsider tone. Biological fathers reconsider distance. This transformation, often discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, shows that once the legal truth has been spoken, arguments lose power because they no longer control the narrative. Through that lens, the maturity Judge Lauren Lake demands is not optional. It is statutory, ethical, and generational. In this final stretch, the courtroom is not dramatic. It is disciplined. What started as accusation, defensiveness, denial, and rumor becomes formalized into legal status. Judge Lauren Lake reminds each parent that children are not extensions of adult regret, nor leverage in relational breakdowns, nor casualties of suspicion. They are citizens protected by parentage law. When she concludes, she does not console those who dislike the result, nor praise those who feel victorious. Instead, she focuses on forward motion. If the father is confirmed, she instructs him to step into responsibility without hesitation. If excluded, she instructs the mother to pursue lawful identification of the true parent with renewed seriousness and verified timelines. The broader legal reminder she delivers is universal. Relationship between law and justice means children must be raised on certainty, not conflict. When custody, visitation, and financial duty begin under clear legal acknowledgement, the emotional landscape shifts from chaos to calendar, from threat to schedule, from rumor to verified documentation. Silence after the ruling is never the silence of defeat. It is the silence of recalibration. Every adult absorbs the truth in their own private space, yet all leave knowing that the child, whose life prompted this courtroom meeting, is now entitled to identity defined by law, not fear. As she strikes her gavel and the matter closes, Judge Lauren Lake affirms the only priority that has ever mattered. A child deserves truth. A child deserves support. A child deserves clarity. And in this courtroom, truth is not delayed, argued away, or reshaped. It is delivered.